The following program is an original production of WICC PBS Chicago.
After the Paris terrorist attacks, many states, including Illinois, are shutting the door on Syrian refugees. Governor Rauner has received criticism for his support to deny entry. But does the governor have the legal power to ban refugees? Illinois faces a critical shortage of nurses, especially those who provide care in patients' homes. Senior citizens and medically fragile children are already feeling the pain. What makes our state among the worst for attracting qualified providers? Plus, it's an aggressive and unique sport, combining cycling and polo. Bike polo is popping up around town. Stay tuned to meet two players who are putting the sport on the map here in Chicago. All of these stories and more tonight on In the Loop. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lauren Cohn. Illinois has a severe shortage of home health care nurses, and the timing could not be worse. More Americans than ever are reaching retirement age, and the nursing shortage is already impacting care for seniors and special needs children. Advocates say home care saves money, keeping patients out of nursing homes and preventing costly hospital readmissions. But state budget troubles and a host of other factors could leave a growing number of the sick and fragile without necessary care. In the Loop's Barbara Pinto has the story.
Okay.
How does it feel?
That feels pretty good, actually. Thank you.
Registered nurse Kat Martinez is literally Bernie Farber's right hand. The 67-year-old attorney suffered a stroke that paralyzed his right side, leaving him homebound.
It's very important. I mean, I really think that without a nurse coming in, that they wouldn't be able to manage themselves at home.
Kat now does what Bernie's damaged limbs cannot. She changes bandages and helps him manage a constellation of chronic illnesses, diabetes, high blood pressure, and swelling that causes life-threatening infections in his legs. Without Kat, Bernie says he'd likely be in a nursing home.
It's life-saving, it really is. I mean, I think a lot of times people who, get institutionalized, they kind of waste away and they give up on life. To me, it's like my life has continued despite the stroke, and I've, managed to be productive with work and maintain my help to my family and my relations with my family. It's very important.
Kat makes up to 8 of these house calls a day, covered by Medicare, treating elderly patients in their own homes. But the kind of crucial support she provides is in short supply. Susan Swider is a professor of nursing at Rush University.
There is a shortage just about nationwide, and there's not only a shortage of practicing nurses, but the ones that are practicing are aging, and so are going to be retiring in the next decade or so, and we're going to need to replace them. And schools of nursing are saying that they don't have sufficient faculty.
The timing couldn't be worse. More Americans than ever, 10,000 a day, are reaching the age of 65, a population expected to live longer with chronic illness as the number of caregivers shrinks.
Just chin to chest, that's it. Stay straight. Yep, and then put your head back. Good.
Here at Rush University's College of Nursing, the classes are full, but most here will choose the higher pay, good benefits, and shorter hours of hospital work. In fact, none of these nurses in training will be qualified to provide home care when they graduate.
Rotate your shoulders forward.
Bob Ebel is the CEO of My Life, a home health care company. For the first time ever, he's had to turn patients away. There simply aren't enough nurses to care for them.
We can't hire recent nursing grads because they have to have a number of years of clinical hospital training because they're not supervised in the home setting. And so we have to make sure that we've got people who are trained and have the experience to provide for all the different things that they may encounter in the home setting. So you take that coupled with the fact that all of the reimbursements for home health providers is being slashed. I mean, we're under siege right now.
In Illinois, the crisis is even more severe because private duty nurses here are among the lowest paid in the nation. Medicaid pays $75 an hour for a home care nurse in Alaska, $52 in Massachusetts and Ohio, but only $32 in Illinois. And state budget cuts make matters worse.
When I first went into private duty nursing, I was making $24 an hour. Then there was a pay cut at $20 an hour, and now we're back up to $21.50.
Phyllis Polvey hasn't had a raise in 10 years. She's the mother of a special needs child of her own and believes caring for Hunter Richards and other medically fragile children is her calling.
Kids like Hunter need skilled care 24/7, and it's a long-term commitment. It's not something that may last 6 days or 6 weeks or 6 years. It can go on and on. So it is something very necessary.
Hunter's severe brain disorder causes violent seizures and makes it tough for him to breathe and move. He and the machines that keep him alive require constant vigilance. Without the help of a team of nurses, his parents, Mike and Paige, who have 2 other young children, would not be able to work or sleep.
We don't look at them as nurses, we kind of look at them as family. I mean, just the way that the care that they provide for Hunter is extraordinary. I mean, without them, I don't know, what we'd be able to do.
700 children in Illinois require this kind of care, but more of them are spending time in hospital beds since there are so few nurses who can look after them at home. Phyllis cares for a number of children, working 70 hours a week to make ends meet. She worries about how long she can afford to do the home care she loves when she could be making more at a hospital. Richards worry too.
It scares us because we've talked about it, and there's no way we would ever institutionalize him. You know, we want to keep him with us, and the nurses are the only way that that's going to happen.
He's our little guy, and we love him. You know, we wouldn't do anything different.
They just hope they won't have to. I'm Barbara Pinto for In the Loop.
Less than 1% of the state's $13 billion Medicaid budget goes to private duty nursing for children. Lobbying efforts in Springfield and Washington aim to increase funding for home care nurses. But with the state's budget crisis, it's an uphill fight. Now here's a look at more stories making headlines this week. Just days after Paris comes under attack by terrorists, Illinois Governor Bruce Rauner joins a chorus of other governors who say they won't take any more Syrian refugees. The move is stirring up controversy, prompting President Obama to reinforce his commitment to accepting those fleeing their war-torn country.
Many of these refugees are the victims of terrorism themselves. That's what they're fleeing. Slamming the door in their faces would be a betrayal of our values.
Terrorists are not only Syrians, they're coming in all shapes, forms, and sizes now. So if we close it off to Syrians, we need to close it off to everyone.
There's new worry tonight as medical marijuana becomes widely available in Illinois. Are medical marijuana users risking a DUI? And what are the guidelines for arrest? The Chicago City Council's first Inspector General could be the last. After 4 years on the job, Faisal Khan is out just 1 month after digging up some dirt on more than 24 aldermen. But the work his office did will live on. The FBI swooped in and confiscated files and computers. On his way out the door, Khan blasted Mayor Emanuel for backing down on City Council oversight. Joining us for this week's panel are journalist and political commentator Monroe Anderson, Paul Dark III, president of Benefit Management Associates, and Jeannie Ives, state representative for the 42nd District. Welcome to all of you. Thanks for being here. I first want to read what Governor Rauner came out and said. Here's his quote. "We must find a way to balance our tradition as a state welcoming of refugees while ensuring the safety and security of our citizens. Therefore, the state of Illinois will temporarily suspend accepting new Syrian refugees and consider all our legal options pending a full review of our country's acceptance and security processes by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security." Monroe, let me begin with you and your reaction to what the governor is saying here.
He is wrong on so many levels that I don't know what to say. First of all, he doesn't get that choice. It's the president who decides how many people can come in or not. Secondly, there is no proof that there is any danger. He talks about security is not at risk. We've allowed nearly 800,000 refugees into this country since 9/11. There have been 3 incidents where the refugees turned out to be terrorists, but they didn't commit terror here. They went elsewhere and were terrorists. We've not had one incident of that.
When you bring up the numbers, 169 out of the some 2,000 Syrian refugees that have been brought here to the United States since 2011 are settled in Illinois, according to the Chicago Tribune, 105 in Chicago. Paul, do you agree that there's no security risk here?
Well, I mean, there's going to always be some security risk. I mean, regardless of whether it's a Syrian or any other refugee, it's just that we have to live by and we have to go by what the president says. It's not a call for the governor. It's a call for the president. And right now, what we have to look at is we have to look at the safety for the constituents, the safety for America. And right now, there are things in place, maybe not to the point where we would like it to be, but there are things in place to protect us and make sure that some of the refugees that are actually coming in are above board, and we do our due diligence.
Jeannie, let me ask you this. The president may have the power, but the governor has the power of the purse. He can stop funding, and this is also what's happening in Congress right now. Paul Ryan's bill is before Congress to stop federal funding for the program.
Well, let me first start by saying that I actually reside in Wheaton, and there's been nobody more welcoming than the Wheaton community in terms of refugee resettlement. Actually, one of World Relief's headquarters is right there in my town, so we understand fully the impact of having refugees resettled and what they have or have not been able to assimilate into the community. I mean, that said, there's a process to bringing in a refugee. First of all, they must be an asylum seeker. And it's a definitive process of what you do. And if you talk to anybody who knows anything about this issue, they will tell you it is an 18 to 24-month vetting process. So all the governors are really saying is, look, we don't want that process short-circuited. We need to go through the entire process and vet these people appropriately. And many times these people are vetted first by UN agencies in their home country or in another area that's been deemed a safe space where they have that 18 to 24 months to research and look into them. The problem with the Syrian refugees crisis is that there's no way to vet them right now because you have no established government operating where you can go back and look and see whether or not whether or not they're at risk for persecution, which is by definition the reason we would bring in a refugee. You have to prove that they're at risk for persecution. So,
which could be a good argument, Monroe, then take a pause and relook at it. And he did use the word temporary.
That's right.
I know, but that's a technicality, really. I mean, when you stop and think about it, these people, the reason they're risking life and their family to get out of Syria is because they're being bombed and shot at and what have you, and their lives are at danger. I mean, and you don't need to go to a government to check that out. You can look on TV and see that's going on. The chance of a terrorist infiltrating that, of course, is a possibility.
It just happened in Paris that a terrorist infiltrated through the refugee process. That's why we're asking for a halt. We're just simply asking that we follow the procedures that we have followed for year after year after year, an 18 to 24-month vetting process where you have the ability to check.
Let me just play some sound for you. This is Samia Akbar. She's with the Karam Foundation in Lake Forest. She works with Syrian refugees. Let's take a listen to what she said.
There are 4 million Syrians that have fled Syria due to ISIS. I invite him to meet the Syrian refugees in Illinois that have resettled, that have fled ISIS. I definitely urge the government to create that process and make sure that everyone that's coming in is who they say they are, but not reject refugees that have been, victims of ISIS and victims of trauma and war. And more than half of the refugees are children. If you even hear some of the stories that they've gone through, we wouldn't be closing the doors to Syrian refugees.
So, Paul, the face we're putting on this is these images of children most of the time, and maybe the majority of the refugees that are coming over are women and children, but there are young men. Does this become more of a political football right now? The city council just announcing this is, still a sanctuary city. The governors, 31 of them have, a strong position or standing together. The president, is it more of a political football and less about the refugees?
Actually, it is. When you look at the whole process, when we talked about the 18 to 24 months, we also have to look at most of these Syrians are just like us. I mean, they're middle class. They have the same desires that we do, and we should be open arms in regards to accepting refugees, particularly Syrian refugees. I understand that there's no system that's foolproof to prevent terrorism. I mean, there's nothing out there that exists right now.
Exactly.
But we have to do what we have to do what's necessary to get it as close as possible. But there's no system out there right now.
I mean, we have our own homegrown terrorists here. I mean, there's no way that you can protect yourself against terrorism 100%.
Well, what about protecting ourselves against politicians beating their chests? Because let me switch gears here and go to what some like to refer to as the Chicago way. Inspector General Faisal Khan in the news this week. He shuts his doors. He gives his paperwork to the FBI. He was hired to oversee the city council. They imposed restrictions on him when he started to ask for money and raise questions. He's gone. Jeannie, what does this say about our government?
Well, what does this say about Chicago government, which is arguably the most corrupt city in the United States? I mean, you've just had you just had the Barbara Byrd Bennett scandal in the face of everything. So, I mean, this says that we are going to do what we want to do, and we don't want you to investigate. Now, my solution is we bring in the Edgar County watchdogs and just have them do what they've done best around the state and, essentially out them on their own. So.
But do you have a situation where you combine the offices then of the city inspector general under Joe Ferguson and not have two positions, Paul?
Well, I mean, it's a hot topic. The inspector general was hired to do a job. The inspector general gave him a 4-year process, and right now, I think what should happen is that when we look at it now, we look at the FBI probe. The whole scenario with the FBI probe, and what we should do is let that person do his due diligence for those 4 years that he was hired to. And at that particular time, if there's something to be said, I think it should be a scenario where the city council should come together first.
Monroe, do you agree with that?
Yeah, city council.
Corruption in Chicago and in Illinois. It doesn't stop at the city limits.
I understand that.
Exactly. It's such a tradition that it's just built into the folkways. And it needs to be uprooted, but they've been trying to uproot it for decades. I mean, I moved here in 1972, and they were uprooting it then, and obviously there's some more uprooting to do. I mean, it's just, when I worked at City Hall, I was Mayor Sawyer's press secretary. It was going on then, and it's just, you understood. I mean, this is how we do things. We do it sort of under
but
the
it
table.
also seems there's a culture of acceptance.
Yes.
We get used to it, we look the other way. That's why we see low voter turnout in a lot of elections.
Well, you know what, and the other thing too is that you see, you have a lot of progressive aldermen, you have a lot of progressive candidates now that are looking to change things and not so much be the old way that Chicago used to be. So you do have a lot of people that adhere to all those different things and that was being said, and they're trying to make a change in regards to the way that people view Chicago or Illinois politics.
Jeannie, it's interesting that you brought up Chicago Public Schools and Barbara Bennett, because the aldermen push for transparency and ethics when it comes to CPS, but not when it comes to themselves.
And everybody needs to have a check and a balance. And these aldermen, I mean, they run a huge budget in Chicago. And I mean, I love the fact that Mr. Khan actually turned over his computer stuff to the FBI on the last day. I think that's going to be a treasure trove of other problems that are going to come out. We need more transparency and more inspector generals, not less.
Right.
Okay, well, speaking of oversight, medical marijuana, 3,300 people now have medical marijuana licenses in Illinois. Monroe, is this a public safety issue now when we talk about DUI? Some of those people may get behind the wheel.
Well, as someone who's read about smoking marijuana, what have you. It's only a problem when you're high. And it would seem to me that if you were on medical marijuana, you would do just as if you were drinking socially or something. You wouldn't take your marijuana and then go behind the wheel. A marijuana high lasts 2 or 3 hours at the most. And so you just don't go anywhere during that time, and it's not a problem. The complication is that the chemical stays in your blood for weeks. And so if a police officer were to pull you over and you were on medical marijuana, you may have done it the night before, but it'd still be in your blood. And so how do you determine if this person is a real DUI or not?
So should it be in the discretion of the police, Paul, when you pull someone over? Should there be levels set like there are for alcohol?
I mean, it's actually a tough thing to do. I think should be, and I'm kind of cautious about saying that when we say the police, but it probably should be, because we have to make sure that these people are not impaired. I mean, that's the whole process with alcohol. I mean, we want to make sure that people are actually responsible when they get under the wheel. They want to make sure that they're not impaired, where they can function in a normality way. And it's really hard to judge it or have something set unless we look at the police force and act on their behalf and make sure that they understand. They have some type of process that they do to make sure that these people are not impaired at all.
Jeannie, do you agree with that when you talk to your constituents in your area?
Well, we really haven't had an issue come up with this in my area, and I haven't really, I mean, I didn't vote for the medical marijuana law. I felt like already we've had trailer bills to clean up language from the first bill because it just wasn't set right. So, I mean, unfortunately, something's going to happen, somebody's going to get hurt, and there's going to be a lawsuit that ensues that comes back to the legislative body to rewrite the laws. I mean, there are other states actually that do say, look, if you have a point whatever it is in your blood of the marijuana, then you've recently used or you've used too much, and we're going to use that as a standard. Right now in Illinois, that's not our standard. It's simply a physical test, which, you know, I guess if you're on medical marijuana, it's quite possible you couldn't pass the physical sobriety test to begin with because of your medical condition. So this is going to get sorted out in the court of law at some point, and it's unfortunate in my opinion.
Yeah, it's like with most laws, they're passed, and then they have to be chiseled and beveled and refined a little bit to work well. The initial legislation frequently has problems with it, and so we'll go through this with the medical marijuana as well. But I think it's a good thing. I've been writing about it for years, and had I been in your job, I would have voted for it.
Well, finally, switching gears, Thanksgiving is upon us. It's already Thanksgiving, and there's a big debate always this time of year among workers is should stores stay open on Thanksgiving? Jeannie.
You know, I'm a free market person, so if the store wants to stay open, and that's great for them. If they lose employees over it, then, you know, you need to retrain your workforce, and that's going to be a cost. So I think every individual store should decide for themselves what they want to do.
Paul,
but I'm not going to be shopping.
You're not going to be shopping on Thanksgiving.
No way.
I don't like to shop on Thanksgiving either. But Paul, you know, workers who do complain, there are other people out there that are out of work and would love to be working on Thanksgiving and have that opportunity to make money. So what's your position?
You know, I'm in total agreement. I just feel that every retailer should have that discretion on what they want to do as far as do they want to be open and on Thursday and not on Friday as well. But you know, the way I look at it is that I know for a fact that I'm eating on Thursday, but in the same breath, my family, what they do is that traditionally they used to go out on Fridays for Black Friday, but now they go on Thursday. So I would say I would leave it to the discretion of the retailer.
I see a smile on Monroe's face.
Yeah, no,
He's about to disagree with you.
No. Actually, I'm in agreement with them about the stores and making a decision. However, I think that it should be built in where you give the employees some vote on this. You know, if they want to be with their family on that day instead of work, I think the employer should let them do that and use the employees that want to work. I don't think you should force somebody to come and work in a store and miss out on the family value. But I think that should be a two-way street.
Well, you know, actually, the other incentive too would just to provide them with time and a half. I mean, if we look at a person that normally would not work on Thursday, and we provide that person, or the retailers provide that person with time and a half, maybe that'll be a little bit more incentive for that person either to make a determination whether they want to go on Thursday or not.
And by the way, the reason I was smiling is I'm a last-minute shopper. I do my shopping on the 23rd and 24th, so it's not a problem.
You're not the last person in the grocery store buying the food to cook for Thanksgiving, too, Monroe, are you?
No, not that. I'm talking about the gifts.
All right, well, thank you so much to our guests, Monroe Anderson, Paul Dark III, and Representative Jeannie Ives, for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For more than 100 years, bike polo has been played internationally, and now some Chicagoans are catching wind of the sport and pedaling, scraping, and bruising their way to victory. They fall, they crash, and they may even injure themselves, but that's the reality of bike polo. The rules of this tough game are similar to traditional polo, but swapping horses for bikes. The sport is open to anyone with an adventurous and fearless attitude, like 31-year-old Coco Johnson. She's been playing the game for 7 years.
I would rather have scuffed up, bruised legs, knowing that I had a really good time and I had a lot of fun with my friends.
Each co-ed team of 3 players uses a mallet and a ball made specifically for the sport. It's a true balancing act. Each player must know how to control their bike and quickly steer with one hand while swinging a mallet in the other. And that's just what Johnson and 20 other members of Chicago's Bike Polo Club do each week. This converted tennis court in Garfield Park on Chicago's west side is home to these enthusiasts.
It's fun and it's silly, and we know it's off cuff, and it's really something that once you start playing, you realize how addicted you can get to it, and you're gonna fall a few times and you might get hurt.
Bike polo's origin dates back to the late 19th century in Ireland, but it became popular among Chicago cyclists just 8 years ago. Brian Bowles is riding the wave. He was one of several local players to compete in the national tournament in Lexington, Kentucky last summer.
I've been a part of the sport and watched the competitive scene and the organization take shape and sort of go through its birth and its current infancy. It's fun, it's silly, it's just weird enough.
For players like Coco Johnson, bike polo is more than a sport.
You can have a really frustrating day. You can have the worst day ever at work or with a family member or a friend. And you can come out here and you can it gives you a chance to breathe, and it gives you a chance to work off all of that frustration.
It's a good time. It kind of gets in your blood.
Before we close next Thursday and Friday, November 26th and the 27th from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., tune in to WYCC for our annual Thanksgiving Mystery Marathon. The 2-day event will be filled with back-to-back mysteries featuring the best detectives from around the globe. Come spend your Thanksgiving with us. In the Loop will return the following Thursday, December 3rd, when Robin Robinson takes a look at homelessness among youth in Chicago. Until then, I'm Lauren Cohn. Good night.